Good evening, my name is Henry Jacoby. I am the president of Simon's Hardware and Bath. On behalf of the Simon's team, there is 8 of us here tonight. We want to welcome everybody to the Institute of Public Architecture 5th Annual Fall Fete. We are excited and honored to be one of the sponsors tonight and really just thrilled to be able to support such an outstanding organization. For those of you not familiar with Simon's Hardware and Bath, we are a specialty decorative hardware and plumbing wholesaler, about to celebrate our 110th year in business here in New York. We operate 3 luxury showrooms that cater to the architect and design space. Our flagship showroom that opened in 1908, I would say is walking distance at 29th and 3rd, but for me tonight with the rain, it was the shortest cab ride in New York history. We have 2 other showrooms in the Hudson Square section of Soho and also in Watermill in Southampton. One other exciting thing for us tonight is to be able to co-chair, co-sponsor tonight with Dornbrock. Dornbrock is one of, if not our most strategic partner, and we're excited that Ingolf Matti is here, who is the president and CEO of Dornbrock Americas, and is going to say a few words.
Yeah. As Henry mentioned, my name is Ingolf Matti, CEO of Dornbrock Americas. Thank you for giving my company, Dornbrock, the opportunity to be a sponsor of the fabulous IPA Fall Fete in this beautiful venue. I hope that some of you know Dornbrock. We are a German manufacturer of high-end faucets and shower systems, and we have a very modern, minimalistic design language. And if I look around here, that really doesn't look like we're fitting well in here. Looking at the Beaux-Arts splendor and some neo-Renaissance features in the Prince George Ballroom. But anyway, this is not important tonight. Important tonight is why we're all here, to support the Institute of Public Architecture in the work for a special cause.
Thank you truly from the IPA, from the bottom of my heart, for helping us to celebrate the 5th year of the Institute for Public Architecture. I can't believe we made it, but we did make it. And we have come a long way. I won't go through all the wonderful programs that we've initiated. I won't even talk about our great partners, our institutional partners who we collaborated with. 2 fantastic residency programs that we held, symposium, bus tours. We've done it all.
So thank you all for coming and supporting the work of the IPA and being part of an organization that promotes and supports activist architects. I'd like to thank our amazing FET chairs, Chris Garvin, Bea de la Torre, and Andy Bernheimer, our lead sponsors, Simons and Dornbrock, and all of you for supporting our work. In 2015, I joined Jonathan to become the executive director of the IPA, and our calling is to promote socially engaged architecture. We believe that just societies are, in part, fostered through democratically inspired public spaces. In 2018, the IPA will host our 3rd summer residency, providing fellowships for innovative thinkers. Our specific goal with the residency is to embed communities with architects, designers, and planners to create effective collaborations that ensure development that is responsive to neighborhoods, and true collaborations that promote prosperity without displacement. And this year, we are determined to transcend the think tank and create innovative and actionable change in these neighborhoods. Please check out our exhibit in the gallery for the past work of our IPA fellows and a draft run of our publication on this vital thinking. We're really excited about where we are at with the publication. In 2018, we will continue the Open City series. Open City is a public forum about the future of urban environments in the era of globalization and amidst the ever-changing worldwide political landscape. This March, Jean-Louis Misica, the deputy mayor of Paris, presented Parisian refugee housing solutions. And during this next year, we are looking to Mexico City. We plan to collaborate and mobilize our resources based on the needs of Mexico City in this very moment, given the tragedy and opportunities afforded by their disastrous earthquakes. Lastly, in 2018, the IPA will continue our Salon Program, a program that brings change makers together to give voice to our enormous challenges in this policy environment. The Salon Program is run through our fully engaged advisory board. headed by Tammy Ferlisi and Matthew Bremer. And I'd like to congratulate our newly elected advisory board of directors with co-chairs Manola Ampudia and Miriam Abda El Azim. And I'd also like to recognize our new executive board members, Chris Garvin, Bea de la Torre, Miltos Catamaris, and Fred Harris.
So I was so honored when Nadine asked me to introduce Rosalie, who for the past 20 years has served as the executive director of the Architectural League of New York. Rosalie, as many of you know, is a tireless advocate for architects, for the art of our vocation, and for the role we play in shaping cities and our world. Her advocacy extends beyond promoting a responsibility to make beautiful things, beyond introducing us to young emerging designers doing critical work, and beyond having eloquent public conversations with mature, iconic practitioners from far-flung places, though she has certainly done and still does all of this. Her advocacy is most critical in that for as long as I have known Rosalie, it has been rooted in a dedicated mission to advance the art and vocation of architecture while challenging us to commit our practices to the difficult issues facing this and other cities. Importantly, Rosalie makes what is a daunting endeavor utterly approachable. And this is because Rosalie herself is approachable. Her intelligence and passion for the promise, for the necessity of elevated, responsible architecture pulls us in. So we watch as Rosalie and the League establish Urban Omnibus during the Great Recession and see it quickly become an indispensable platform for inquiry on cities and city making. We watch as the League conceives Housing Brass Tacks, a series poking the beehive that is our city's most important architectural typology. Provocations that touch on policy, finance, politics, not just architecture, in the interest of creating an informed public and an informed profession. The League's litany of programs has become indispensable to the culture of New York, and to that we owe Rosalie a great debt. I am so happy and totally honored to introduce and honor Rosalie Ginevra.
Thank you to all of you and to the Institute for Public Architecture for this honor, which is really a significant thing to me. Because the Institute for Public Architecture has such a special and important mission to support and encourage architects whose own mission in their work is to create architecture that serves the social good, it's a particular pleasure to be honored by IPA and also to be honored on the same evening as Michael Murphy and Jeanette Sadik Khan. Creating and sustaining a new organization is not easy work. And I applaud Jonathan and Nadine and former Executive Director Karen Kuby for their commitment and for creating a forum to bring together people with a shared and driving desire to use their art to make the world better. As Andy said that I've been at the League for 20 years. Well, it's actually more than that. It's actually been more than 30 years. And the possibility of that kind of connection to an institution has everything to do not only with what you do, but who you do it with. We had a board of directors meeting at the League this morning, and I thought again, as I listened to the conversation, as I have many times over the years, what a fascinating, stimulating group of people have gathered around the League. And I thank them all for their support over the years and think about how lucky I have been to be part of it. I also want to thank the people I work with on a day-to-day basis, because the work of the League is done by a truly stellar group of committed people. Since I've been there for so long, I'm going to take the tack of mentioning by name only a few people, because we would be here all night. But a few people who've also had long tenures with the League. But this thank you does really go to all of the wonderful people who have worked there over the years. I want to thank Ann Rieselbach, the League's program director, who's been at the League almost as long as I have. Nick Anderson, our managing director, and 3 people who have left to go on to other work after long stints at the League. Greg Wessner, who had 3 tours of duty at the League. He just couldn't leave before he finally decamped to run Open House New York. Qasim Shepard, the founding editor of Urban Omnibus, our online magazine, and Varric Shute, who did a number of jobs at the League, including being founding managing editor of Omnibus and overseer of all of our digital publications. Thank you to them all and to all the great people who've worked with the League over the last several decades. I also want to thank my husband, Armand Lagarder, and my daughters, Bibi and Leah Lagarder, because no one does much of anything without the support of those they're closest to. I want to say something about all of you, or at least about what I think is the very large proportion of people in this room who are yourselves architects or deeply involved in architecture and have committed to contributing to the public good through your work. One always wants to stay away from grandiose statements about this time is different from all others and it's never been as important as now. But I think that many of us feel down to our marrow that in fact this time is different, and in fact it never has been as important as now to work for the idea and the reality of the public good, and for the very idea of the public as a worthy focus of attention. Commitment to the public good demands perhaps a particularly hard balancing act from architects. That balancing act involves paying attention to the very particular and the middle range and the systemic simultaneously. It involves being able to create beauty and ease for the enjoyment of an individual inhabitant of one of your buildings, and working towards a better, larger scale, whether a block or a neighborhood or a whole section of the city, and being able to critique and improve through deep understanding of how it all works, the system that allows you, or in some cases thwarts you, in producing that work. Neve Brown, the great British social housing architect who recently got the RIBA gold medal, talks lovingly about the detailing on a screen between apartment terraces that from one angle allows through light and air, but as one moves next to it, perceptually closes up to create a feeling of privacy. In that same interview, he thunders about the failings of the current UK housing system and calls for its wholesale overhaul. He, of course, was doing these things at different points in his career, but that is the model, especially for right now. Create beauty wherever it is possible to create it, and be loud and bold about the systemic issues that face us. The idea of the public and the public good desperately need us all right now. Go forth and be loud. Thank you.
Yes, my name is Katie Swenson. I'm the Vice President of Design and Sustainability at Enterprise Community Partners. I'm so glad to be back with you this year. It was a special treat for me last year when I was awarded this fabulous honor to have been introduced by Shola Alatoye, my colleague at Enterprise, and of course the leader of the New York City Housing Authority. So it was a great pleasure that I got to sort of give back in kind and honor Michael Murphy here tonight. I'll tell you that in 2010, I sat in a room a little bit bigger than this, about 400 people at Howard University. And I was there going on about 10 years of my own work in public interest design. And their audience was filled with young people who were really architect activists who were wanting to make the world a better place. And we heard stories from communities all around both America and the globe. And then all of a sudden up on stage, something just shifted. And Michael Murphy came and he presented to this group the Botaro Hospital. And I will say that my world, and I think our world, fundamentally experienced sort of a moment shift. For me, the public interest design movement, which we now call that, right? There was a time we didn't know what we were calling it. We were just trying to do it. Had really good ambitions, but maybe sort of small actualizations of our ambitions. We were skirting a little bit around the edges, trying to understand how to bring design into the public realm, but in potentially ways that were small and incremental. And when Michael showed the work of mass design that day, the sort of ambitions, I would say, of a whole generation shifted. So it's with great honor and pleasure and pride that I introduce Michael Murphy, Executive Director of Mass Design.
My biggest thanks tonight goes to the Institute of Public Architecture, not simply for this unbelievable recognition, but for its existence. Public architecture is a noble goal. It should be obvious, though, right, that architecture is a public good. But somehow, somewhere, we have lost our way as a profession and as a discipline. We've surrendered agency. We've abandoned our core principles. The public does not any longer consider our work theirs. The need for such an institute, then, is more pertinent now than ever. But I also, and forgive me for speaking out of turn, see a future where such an institute may no longer be necessary. We should seek a future where the public expects and demands that architecture is restored to its rightful role, that as a public amenity, where the defining characteristics of architecture are synonymous with the ethics and accountability that reinforce our publics, where it is again a public service to be an architect, where it is again a public debate where we choose to place infrastructure, and where design engenders that choice in the service of our communities, where we once again translate what is possible for those around us, trading in what we so often offer, but so often forget to talk about, the dignity that we're able to instill into place, and where it is again a profession that binds beauty not to privilege, but to social justice, and where architecture is again seen as a reliable loom to the social fabric that we seek to live within. This is why I'm uncomfortable tonight, for as we have been labeled social architects in the past at MASS, and even our name MASS, which an acronym stands for a model of architecture that serves society, often not mentioned, it suggests a position in support of an aspirational social agenda. But even that I've become increasingly uncomfortable with. I'm uncomfortable with the notion of what that would mean in the inverse. For example, what is an architecture that's not for the public good? What is an unsocial architecture? What is an unhumanitarian architecture? Architecture that is weaponized or violent, that which is used to disrupt communities and to fight and not to fight intolerance, such work should never really be called architecture in the first place, and certainly those who work on it not called architects. And so this accountability, this responsibility, it is a stifling burden for all of us. And I understand why architecture and its theory have flirted with social change and then retreated to autonomy and isolation. We have seen this pendulum swing back and forth, and we may be again at that inflection point of another swing, and that end of a public and social awakening that Rosalie talked about, only to find in the next few years designers again seeking only what they think they can control and what they think their limited reach actually can contain. So I want to say or suggest tonight that we must stop this pendulum from swinging. We must commit ourselves not to allow this debate to carry on any longer. We must empower that next generation and resist the inclination to peer only inside our discipline for inspiration. All architecture is public, all of it. All architecture is social. There really isn't another choice. The decisions we make are never able to be divorced from the social and political impacts that they have on the world. We need to make a choice whether we acknowledge this or not. And to not acknowledge it should be looked at, rightly so, as an injustice, as a negligence we as a profession are unwilling to accept. But we really need the vocabulary to do so, the tools, the examples, and the precedents to know how to resist when our number is called, and to know how to find courage when our mettle is tested. And I want to thank the IPA and my co-winners for showing us, for showing me how to do this, for leading the way, for building this vocabulary, for showing these precedents, and for acknowledging the bravery and commitment to remind us why we got into this profession in the first place, to design and build a world we aspire to live within. So I'm humbled to even be considered eligible to be on this stage and to recognize and to be recognized at all. And I give much more credit to my founding partners, Alan Ricks, Sierra Bainbridge, David Saladick, and our leadership team of Kelly Doran, Christian Benimana, Sarah Moland, Patricia Gruitz, Matthew Smith, Amy Shao, Justin Brown, and John Rudikoff and David Mistretta, who are here with us and tireless advocates for our work, and mostly to our board members and supporters who have given us runway to get here. And to all of you for helping us believe in something greater in ourselves and for giving us dignity and the mettle to continue. Thank you very much for this great honor.
It's great to be back here, and I want to thank Jeanette and for asking me to be here, and Jonathan as well. I grew up riding a bike in New York at a time when riding a bike in New York was really very dangerous. I did it as a child until one day I hit a pothole on Minetta Lane and flew headlong over the handlebars, thank you, and splat into the building across the way. And I woke up to find an elderly Italian woman carrying groceries. She was a patient of my father's, stepping over my prone body. And so I stopped riding a bike for a while. And then when I moved to Berlin, I took it up again because everyone rode bikes and it was just normal. It was a way of life. And it seemed like there was no question that this was a better way to live. So when I came back to New York 6 years ago and was sort of scouting for stories to write related to subjects that I hoped as the architecture critic to make the focus of my work: social housing, equity, the environment, the public realm. I thought, there are a lot of things that had happened in New York in my absence. There were these bike lanes, but they really weren't worth writing about because who possibly didn't like the bike lanes? So it took me a little bit of time to realize that that was not true, that there were some people who seemed not to like them. And I called up this woman, Jeanette Sadekhan, and she met me one morning on a hot, humid weekday at the corner of 23rd Street and 9th Avenue. I had my heavy German bike. She had what I remember as an entourage, but it was probably just Seth. And then we rode down 9th Avenue, and we kept riding, and we eventually rode over the Williamsburg Bridge, I think. And all I remember about this was that I knew that this was not just a tour, but a test. And that this was a kind of test of one's mettle, and I was dealing with somebody who was a street fighter and somebody who didn't suffer fools. So I then realized why it is that she did not have an easy time with the New York Post and all these aged, car-loving conservative columnists for the Wall Street Journal, and people who loved their parking spaces and thought streets belonged to cars, not people. I suspect many of them didn't actually like smart and powerful women either. So lately I reread, and I recommend you read, if you haven't, Jeanette's book, Street Fight. And I was looking at the chapters on bike lanes where she recounts the hysteria in the months before I arrived, clueless, from Europe. And I tried to imagine what it was like to hear these endless lies and misinformation circulated to undermine people and policies that are in fact embraced by a majority and good for us. Those days, thank God, are long behind us. Don't worry, sis, her brother consoled her. She says in the book, the scouts always get the arrows. And I think that's a really important point, that struggle really is the only path toward progress and truth. And the truth, of course, as we know, was that even on Prospect Park West, far from causing more accidents, accidents plummeted when the bike lane was there, driving times were unchanged, and people who rode bikes were deeply grateful. Meanwhile, Jeanette and her team have given us so much else. 60 public plazas, including Times Square, 400 miles of bike lanes, the nation's first protected lanes, too. The safest streets New York has seen since the record-keeping began. City Bike, which now just passed 50 million rides, the first 7 rapid bus lanes. She notes in the book that what happened after she left office, and Mayor de Blasio mindlessly suggested undoing the Times Square plazas, even though for all the plaza's imperfections, restoring cars and forcing millions of people to dodge traffic, and flew headlong into his own Vision Zero initiative. I mean, the backlash against the mayor proved obviously something had changed, Jeanette notes. And that is that public perceptions had shifted about what public space was and who it belonged to. So I'm very grateful over these years to have gotten to know Jeanette as a friend, and she's funny and inspiring and brilliant and a real visionary, and somebody who reminds us how important it is to work hard for what matters. However high-handed her detractors like to say she was, she is actually, and that is because she wants to get things done, she's really about working for what is the democratic essence of our society, how to restore public space to the public. She and I have been talking in recent years about the new frontier for the public realm, which is the autonomous vehicle, where we will need enormous amounts of leadership and guidance and governance to focus on public space for what is good and healthy. And I'm glad Jeanette is around to do that for us. It's a great pleasure and an honor to thank Jeanette for a great ride and for this honor.
Thank you, Michael, and I'm so glad you didn't use any of the other material you might have had on hand. Michael mentioned a little bit about the street fight, changing, the streets of New York City, not for the faint of heart. But, and we do have a sort of a personal toll that ends up taking on all of us, particularly on our families, right? So at one point in time, my son Max, who was about 12 when we were going through this, I was being attacked by the New York Post, and I came home and Max said, don't worry about it, Mom. Nobody reads the New York Post. And then the next time it happened was the Daily News, and Max said, don't worry, Mom. Nobody reads the Daily News. And then, when it was the New York Times, Max said, oh, well, yeah, people do read the New York Times. So it has definitely been a street fight, and I'm thrilled to be here tonight at the IPA and to accept this award along with the amazing awardees, my fellow awardees, Michael Murphy, who I've been having the pleasure of collaborating with over the last couple of years and now have the honor of serving on his board, and Rosalie Gennaro, who has made such an important contribution both here in New York, and those kinds of examples and inspiration has traveled around the world. But I also really want to make and thank the people who made this all happen. It doesn't happen, by the Commissioner of the Department of Transportation. It happens with the 4,500 men and women of the Department of Transportation, and some of them are here today. So I want the people from New York City who helped us get there, raise their hand, raise your hands. You're all here. Raise your hand. And my colleagues at Bloomberg, raise your hands. Because they're really the people that made it happen. And I do want to say a quick word about Michael Kimmelman. And as you've heard, he has done so much to advance the conversation, whether it's housing, whether it's public realm, whether it is parks, infrastructure. You all know him since he's been a previous awardee. But one of the things that's amazing about Michael is he takes a people view of cities, a street view, and whether it is Mexico City, whether it's London, whether it's Berlin, Guangzhou, or any place that he touches down, he tells the essential stories, whether it is resilience, whether it's climate change, whether it is transit or the equity of place. And he captures the rhythm of places, and I think part of that's because he's an accomplished pianist, but he covers issues in an urgent, compelling, and candid way, oftentimes too candid for people. But he, in his role, he's completely redefined the role of architect and critic, and I am deeply honored to count him as a friend. So, most people think about architecture and design in terms of buildings and structures, but there is also the architecture of public space. And the design of that space between buildings is as important as the buildings themselves. Because the greatness of cities doesn't reside in its landmarks. It's in the great space and the places that it creates for people to tell their story of their city. And a city with vibrant public spaces, where people aren't afraid to cross the street, and where people want to be, even when they're not going anywhere, is a great city. And when we see the connection between people and a place, we see that everything we design and build is a public act. We worked hard on this under Mayor Mike Bloomberg's administration, whether it was Fordham Road to the Flatiron, Fingerboard Road to Flatbush. We did a lot of work. There's a lot more to be done. You know, we just wrote an op-ed recently about Trump Tower and the tsunami of traffic that's there. And just imagine what could happen if you pedestrianized Fifth Avenue, you know, from 59th to downtown. You could connect Central Park to Bryant Park. I mean, it'd be this great new civic space, right? We could do it. We could do it. Because every building and every street and every sidewalk is social infrastructure, and it is part of our social compact. They help us meet our shared goals of access and mobility and equity and prosperity and safety. And crafting a public realm that is of, by, and for the people isn't a question of engineering. It's a question of imagination. And you don't have to be an architect or an engineer or an urban planner to see the possibilities. Everyday citizens are the true urbanists of the 21st century. We're learning to read the street, to see not just what's there, but the possibilities that have been hidden for so long. We've shown that these transformations don't need to take a lot of time, and they don't need to take a lot of money. And we are now at this dramatic moment where tactical urbanism is now practical urbanism, where alternative transportation is just transportation, where plazas and protected bike paths and bike share and bus lanes are infrastructure, not innovation. And this is the operating code that we need to create a sustainable and equitable future that we all want. And in this rapidly urbanizing, warming, automating world, we have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to create the cities that we want to see. And now is the time. We have the vision, we have the voice, we have the tools, and with the leadership of everyone in this room, we can make it happen. Thank you for this award.